Welcome to Tanakh Talk. I'm your host, William Hall, broadcasting live out of Kingsland, Texas, USA, with episode number 105 of Rabbi Tovia Singer's Let's Get Biblical Q&A. Welcome and presenting Rabbi Tovia Singer again. Been missing you, sweet Rabbi. How are you?
Great to be back.
Good. I really love this song. I wish I could play the whole thing before we started, but it's just, people don't have that kind of patience. That's all right. Wow, welcome back. It's good to be back. I hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving. If you celebrate Thanksgiving Day, I know we had a really good one with our family in Oklahoma, and got to see my mother and stepdad and a cousin, and it was very relaxing, except for the drive. I could always do without those long drives. I'm just not a driver, I guess you could say. So how was your this past week?
It was fabulous. We just did a terrific presentation, lectured in Jakarta today, and I didn't realize it was Thanksgiving because I'm on the other side of the planet.
Right.
So but we had a wonderful program today where we had Jews, B'nai Noach, Christians, Muslims, gathered together for a few hours of studying Tanakh. So that was very, very exciting.
Wonderful.
We really had a wonderful time. It was very, very special, yeah.
Every once in a while I'll get a question or a comment saying, because some people still don't know where you're at, and they will say, it's really interesting. They say they're here in like Texas or something, and say it's Shabbat, but Rabbi Singer's on the internet. I'm like, yeah. Let me walk over to his house and let him know that he shouldn't be doing that. So your time frame is 12 hours off of ours. I mean, almost to the minute. So that even caught me a few times. I was like, is this guy really Orthodox Rabbi? Why is he on the internet? And I had no idea where you were located. I was oblivious to it, but it's fun. Okay, so anyway, so your lecture that you did, how many hours ago was it?
Maybe 6 hours ago, 7 hours ago. We started. We started about 2:00, and the lecture went for about 3-4 hours.
Wow,
and it was very
nice.
exciting because it was a really nice mixed group. Indonesia is the largest Muslim country in the world, with let's say 230 million Muslims, but there are also 25 million Christians and so forth. It's a sizable country. So there was really had an eclectic group. We had Muslims that came in from other islands, like and traveled for 12 hours just to be at this program to study Tanakh and to ask their questions. And it was just very shocking. I mean, one fellow and his wife on a motorcycle or scooter, which is very popular here in Southeast Asia. When I say popular, I mean the streets have hundreds of thousands at a moment you see, and people sometimes travel across islands going over ferries, and this one fellow traveled hundreds of miles just to spend a few hours, he and his wife, to study a few hours of Tanakh. So it was really exciting. It was a wonderful gathering of folks with great questions. We just had a blast. It was a wonderful. I couldn't possibly have enjoyed this day more than I did.
When you do your lectures, do you is the format? Do you give your lecture, but then afterwards you go ahead and do Q&A, kind of like what we do here?
No, never.
Oh, really?
No, I always, I don't really like giving. I used to give lectures. I used to speak. Typically, in my many public speaking engagements, I would speak for 45 minutes to an hour, and then I would take questions for a couple of hours. But I found that people really love the Q&A, and I do too, because it's completely unpredictable. You never know what people are going to ask about. And I really enjoy the spontaneity of Q&A, and I so much cherish it because you never know what's coming, that at the moment the call comes in, you just feel it, and you feel that pow. And I don't like things that are I wouldn't say staged, but things that. Now, I did a very well-known audio series that's on our site because people did have to study Isaiah 53 in great depth. We are going through the book of Isaiah. Those are full, big presentations because people want to study these topics in depth. But now every show I do is Q&A. I enjoy it. The audience loves it. And it's reality broadcasting because you don't know what's going to happen. It's completely unpredictable. And it's exciting. And
do you record? Do you have? Can you record video record it and actually put them up on the internet so we can all see them, or is it just something that's
sure, of course.
Really? Oh, that'd be awesome.
That the lecture I gave today. I mean, it's not a lecture. As I said, it was a Q&A. Must have gone. I think it went for 3 hours. It was the longest ever. 3.5 hours. Yeah, it's all been recorded on video, and I'm going to put them up in modules in YouTube, and they'll be coming out over the course of the next couple of weeks. When we put it up, so I like to put up all the passages. It's like quote a lot of many verses and refer to things that people I think want to see visually, and sometimes I discuss chronology and history, and I kind of want to bring it together so people could see it visually. It makes it easier. So yeah, they'll be going up. They were all recorded. It really was a very, very exciting day. Every question was a knockout. We had Christians who asked some very incisive questions, very thoughtful, just wonderful. Terrific young man who was a Seventh-day Adventist asking some pressing questions. Just loved it. The whole day was brilliant. Loved it.
Nice. I didn't realize it, but I actually have with the software that I use. Remember, I was trying to figure out how to get video editing software so I could actually use it and stuff, and I didn't realize it until recently that the software that I'm using, I can actually do video editing on this actual software. So I'm because there's a couple of topics that you've talked about before that you don't have modules on, and I may go back and actually create modules out of those just to get them out there. So it'd be kind of nice. So, okay, well, we'll get this thing kicked off. Appreciate you sharing with me all the small talk I needed to indulge in. And so number is 855-952-4253. Please call in with your questions. Let me put that number back on screen again. I think I covered up my screen where I can't see it. There it is right there. I'll put that up for you now. And so it's 855-95-BIBLE for you on the go. You can program it in your phone later. And just when you call in, you'll leave if you call when we're not recording, you'll have the opportunity to leave a message. If you'll leave your name and number and keep it kind of, even if you're live or recording, it's better to keep your question condensed rather than making it long. If you were to write out your question on a piece of paper, it really should be in a couple sentences if you can. I understand some questions are complex and you really can't, but do your best. We'll do our best to get to them, and some questions just won't make on air. But maybe you can contact Rabbi if you don't get answered. You can send him an email, toviasinger1@aol.com. And if he can find you in the middle of that haystack of thousands of emails, you might still get a chance of getting hold of him. And same here. People send me messages all the time, and I'm not being rude. I just simply don't open them. And part of the reason why is if I don't think I have time to respond, I won't open them until I think I have time. But then by that time, 20 or 30 messages come through, and I'll lose 15 of them. So just be patient whenever you try to reach Rabbi Singer or anybody else for that matter. And yeah, so we'll get going with this thing. Okay, so Rabbi, the phone line, like I said, the phone lines are open, but no one's calling in yet. So I'm going to start off with a written question that was submitted. Hi, William. My name is Leanne. I've been on my journey out of Christianity for at least 5 years. I would currently classify myself as a Noahide. I would like to leave a question for Rabbi Tovia Singer. My question is, is the truth that the Catholic Church formed Islam and trained Muhammad as a way of deceiving people? I've seen a few YouTube videos claiming this and want to know if there is any fact behind it. Thank you, Leanne. Leanne is a great question. Rabbi, you feel like tackling this one?
Wow. So the question is, did the Catholic Church invent Islam in order to mislead people? That's about the it's one of the crazier ideas. And I just would say to you that whoever staked out such a claim, make sure never to study anything that person teaches, because there's nothing could be more ridiculous. Islam is the Catholic Church's worst nightmare, because the most central text of the Islamic religion, the Quran, it rejects the fundamental tenets of Roman Catholic Church, of all of Christianity. For example, I mean, there's the Roman Catholic Church teaches fundamentally that Jesus was divine. He was the second person of a triune Godhead. The Quran contains many different messages and teachings and fundamental principles, but there is nothing that's more important. There's no message that's repeated more frequently than there is no God but the true God, La ilaha illallah. I mean, that's said in so many different ways that it just over and over and over again. Never make that mistake. In fact, the Quran goes so far with regard to the Christianity in the 7th century. There was no Protestantism then. It doesn't make a difference. Anyways, because Protestants believe in Trinity. The Quran very specifically condemns the doctrine of the Trinity, very specifically in Al-Nisa, which means the 4th surah, verse 171, where it condemns, it calls them the people of the book, but in this passage it's referring specifically to Christians, and the Quran condemns them and says, stop exaggerating your teachings. There is no truth, and there's only one God, and there is no three, or there is no Trinity. So the Quran very specifically attacks the doctrine of the Trinity. The Quran, it's actually all over it, but in the 4th surah, in the 5th surah, 19th surah, everywhere, it specifically says, do not teach and do not believe that the Messiah is God or the Son of God. So it's over and over again assaulting what emerged out of the Council of Nicaea and Constantinople in the 4th century, 325 and 381 respectively. So it specifically says that the Messiah is not God. And the Quran considers Jesus to be the Messiah, but it is very important to understand that the concept, who Jesus is in Islam, is completely different than Christianity. It only superficially appears to be similar because in the Quran he's born of a virgin, of Mary and so on. But aside from that outer sketch, they have nothing to do with each other. In fact, the Quran makes very specifically in the same chapters I discuss, very specifically says that Jesus was not the Son of God, but rather he was only a messenger. So the Quran is very directly attacking the fundamental heresy of Christianity. Christianity's a self-inflicted wound of the church that would develop over time, where Christendom would make Jesus not just the Messiah, but God manifested in the flesh. So anybody who would suggest the Catholic Church invented Islam is lost their mind, essentially. It's not only so the first thing is that in Islam, Jesus was a Navi. He was a prophet. He was actually a higher order of prophet called the Rasul, which means he brought a Sharia, he brought a specific message. But he was in no way divine, no way worthy of worship. And his message essentially is for Jews to keep the Torah, to be faithful to the teachings of Moses. That's what Muslims teach. So it has nothing at all to do with the Roman Catholic Church, and opposes the Roman Catholic Church, because in the central to Christianity, and now we can sort of wind the clock back further, and that is what we find in all but one of the four Gospels, in Matthew, Mark, and John, and certainly in all of Paul's letters, the notion that Jesus died for the sins of mankind, that the centerpiece of Christianity is that that Jesus was crucified and died for the sins of the world. And if you believe in him, you're saved. And if you don't believe in him, you're damned. You're going to hell, and there's no hope for you. It says it openly in Mark 16. It says all over the Christian Bible that there is no salvation outside of the cross, and anybody who attends any Christian service, unless it's some Unitarian Universalist church, you're going to hear that from the minute you walk in to the minute you leave, and that is that Jesus died for the sins of mankind, and if you believe in him, you're washed in the blood of the Lamb. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, that means you grew up in Borough Park, Brooklyn, in a Jewish neighborhood. It's that's the core tenet. In Islam, this is complete nonsense and heresy. In fact, in the same surah, in Surah Al-Nisa, but just a little bit back in chapter 4, but verse 157, the Quran is very clear that Jesus was never even crucified. And it only appeared that way. Now, there is some discussion among Islamic scholars of precisely what does it mean that he appeared to. But what is clear is that the Quran is saying that Jesus never died on the cross. According to almost all Muslims, Jesus never died, but rather ascended to heaven. But the key point is, not only didn't he die for anybody's sins, he didn't die. He was never crucified. Now, that takes the whole Christian Bible and throws it in the garbage. Bear in mind that when Muslims speak, I'm not the elected spokesperson of the Islamic religion, but this is a point that it's very easy to speak to. The centerpiece of all of Christianity is the cross, Romans chapter 1. I mean, that's everything. According to Christianity, Jesus didn't die, let alone for anybody's sins. And in Islam, not only didn't Jesus die, but nobody could die for anybody's sins. And the only way that someone could be forgiven is by repenting, by turning back to God, confessing their sin, and then through God's mercy, in fact, one of the names of God that's very prominent in the Quran is God is called the Rahman, which also is in Judaism, that through God's mercy, a Muslim hopes to be forgiven for their sins. Muslims don't walk around saying, I'm guaranteed anything, but, like someone gets on a plane and they hope very much that plane lands. But Muslims put their hope of forgiveness only in the mercy of God as a result of their own initiative, as their own repentance, and so on. So the Catholic Church opposed Islam. In fact, the most notorious polemicist against Islam, who said pretty much the most vile things about Muhammad, was a Catholic monk who was a saint, Saint John of Damascus in the 8th century. He wrote a major work attacking heresies and attacking Muhammad and attacking he was quite familiar with Islamic teachings. He lived in a world that was in the world of Islam, and he assaulted, he attacked Islam from every which way, let alone that the Islam and Christianity would battle for more than 700 years. A war that would begin very early in the 8th century, let's say 810, and go all the way to the 15th century, to 1492. Imagine a war battled for more than 7 centuries. The Arabian Peninsula, during the time of the emergence of Islam in the 7th century, was filled with pagans, for sure, with the Jewish communities in Arabia, and Christians that were there. And you can be sure that there was competition. According to all Orientalists, people who study this topic, that the Jews and Christians were both vying for converts among the pagans who were in Arabia. It was the idea to Christianity that someone would emerge and say that the doctrine of the Trinity, the core creed of the church, is complete heresy, and that the Quran would identify the Trinity specifically by using by attacking the concept that God is and his messengers do not speak of three or a trinity. It very specifically says that Jesus never died on the cross, that Jesus was only a messenger. This is very important, I'll just say this, and if I don't think any Muslim will be angry at me for saying this, but I'm not going to. I think it's when I hear sometimes Muslims even use the term Jesus Christ, I would. It's really not my business for a Jew to stick his nose in someone else's religion, but the word Christ is a Greek word, and essentially Islam stripped away everything that was Greek about Christianity, to the point that Jesus is a messenger, died for nobody's sins, wasn't crucified, wasn't divine, wasn't the Son of God. All of that Islam rejected. So no, whoever is going around teaching that the Catholic Church invented Islam or had anything to do with creating Islam is completely ignorant of the Islamic faith, and it might as well believe in a flat Earth society and so on and so forth. But it's an interesting question. I never heard that before.
I'm actually guessing that maybe the same people heard a similar story about Christianity being invented by the Jews to take the idolaters away from Judaism, because they say Paul could have been used as a decoy to steer people who were in idolatry away from Judaism. Anyway, maybe you can talk about that later.
Well, I mean, just to say a point here, I mean, that would have been. Look, the New Testament is very anti-Jewish. Now, I know the Christians, I'm going to get 5,000 emails. Right. Don't send them to me. The whole Christian Bible was written by people who really were not interested in making the Jews look good, because the Jews are portrayed as the absolute villains in the Christian Bible, and the culpability of the Romans, and Pontius Pilate in particular, recedes at a very visible spectrum or trajectory, where from Mark to John, Pontius Pilate is being urged by the Jews to crucify Jesus, but he's kind of in on it. By the time we get to John, the Jews are totally and exclusively responsible for it. If we go to texts that didn't make it into the Christian canon, like the Gospel of Peter, Pontius Pilate is completely absolved of any responsibility. So no, the Christianity emerged was a very anti-Jewish religion from the time we have the writings of Paul. In fact, 1 Thessalonians, probably almost certainly the oldest surviving Christian document, no doubt from the hand of Paul, in chapter 2, verse 14 through 16, states openly that the Jews are uniquely responsible for killing Jesus and are contrary to all mankind. So we have the Jews are attacked and assaulted right from the get-go, and it just goes nuclear from that point. So, no, these conspiracy theories are only work on people who don't go to the original text. Go to the original text, look it up for yourself. This is complete nonsense.
Wow, that's cool. I just went to look that up. Yeah, 1 Thessalonians 2, 13, 14, 15. That's interesting. Wow.
Yeah, even as they have the Jews who both killed the Lord Jesus Christ and their own prophets, contrary to all men, forbidding us. I mean, let me just say this: if you're in Canada and you expressed what it says in 1 Thessalonians, if you were in Austria and you just expressed, let's say you said that publicly, if you were in Germany, they would throw you in prison. Wow. The United States doesn't have hate laws, but it means you could pretty much say whatever you want, as long as you don't actually tell people to go kill people. But in Canada, and certainly in Germany and Austria, if you would get caught saying what is in the Christian Bible, you can be thrown in prison.
Wow.
For hate. Absolutely.
That's crazy.
I mean, look, Christians are not crazy. Luther was not a nut job. Luther looked at these texts, these Christian texts, and concluded correctly, based on these texts, that if these texts are the word of God, then the Jews are the most banal enemy of God, and the Christ killers. And in the fact, we have very early documents like Melito, a very early church father, in the 2nd century, who holds the Jews completely culpable for killing God, for committing deicide, in a very elaborate letter which survives. So very early on, the Jews are held accountable, and not only are the Jews of that generation, meaning of the generation of Jesus of when he was crucified, but in Matthew's gospel, the Jews pronounce that filthy text that where the Jews pronounce that we take, after Pontius Pilate washes his hands of the guilt of Jesus' execution, the Jews say we take it upon ourselves and our children, which means that the Jews, in Matthew's view, are not just then, but for all time, are responsible for these. Luther was a completely rational person. It's a very big mistake to say Luther was an anti-Semite. Martin Luther would have been a very nice person, I am sure, if he was never exposed to these hideous texts.
Interesting.
And I'm really shocked. I want to say this to the Christians who do like Jews. You guys are amazing. To read a Christian Bible and not just want to chop a Jew's head off is just shocking.
Right.
And it really is kudos to you that you can read these texts and walk away from it and not want to just chop a Jew's head off. So
that's good.
All right.
Okay, well, let's take this caller. Caller, welcome to the show. Please tell us your name and where you're calling from.
Hi, my name is Steve. I'm calling from Brooklyn, New York.
Welcome, Steve.
Fan of the Rabbi. Hi, thanks. So I sent this question to the Rabbi on the intermediary days of Holomoid Sukkot. So, Rabbi, I also sent you that video. So I don't know, I just kind of tuned in the middle. I hope you didn't ask this question, but it kind of connects to what you're saying. So we get all very upset about the story of the Good Samaritan and how anti-Semitic it is. However, what's the difference between that and all the prophets that rail against Israel, like Zechariah, Jeremiah, the two sisters that were prostitutes, and even in the 5 books of Moses when the Jews sinned? We're also exposing our bad stuff, airing our bad laundry. So what's the difference between the two? How do we differentiate? And then also just had a quick question. If you want to handle it, if not, it's okay. In this past week's Torah portion, we read about how Jacob was fooled into marrying Leah. So my question to you is, why did Rachel agree to this whole deception? What about Jacob's feelings? How come Jacob is chopped liver and we're more careful about Leah's feelings as opposed to Jacob's? Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it, buddy.
Thank you.
Shalom Aleichem.
Thanks.
Okay, so let me address this question.
Go ahead.
This is a question that's asked frequently. I discussed this in the past, and I'll repeat it again. What we find, the story of the Good Samaritan, I grew up in the English-speaking world, and Good Samaritan always is associated with something very positive. It's about somebody who helps another person out, who's in trouble. Something's happening to him, and a person steps in, and he's a Good Samaritan. And there are many hospitals called Good Samaritan hospitals. It means to any English speaker, the term Good Samaritan only conjures up very positive thoughts. But the parable of the Good Samaritan, which is found in Luke chapter 10, is a disgusting anti-Semitic parable. In short, there's a man lying on the road between Jericho and Jerusalem who's dying. And along comes the priest, the Jew, the fancy Jew, and he goes, "Ha!" And he sees the man there who's laying on the side of the road, and he walks by, and he's not interested in helping him. And then along comes a Samaritan, and he sees the person who's on the road. And what he does is, in stark contrast to the filthy Jew, he goes and he takes the person and he feeds him and takes care of him and nourishes him and cleans him and so on until the person is better. This is in the Christian Bible. This is a repeated theme, although the parable of the Good Samaritan is in elsewhere. The key point is the Gospels in particular, more than any other text, are most toxic, most anti-Jewish, because they tell stories and parables where the characters are very, very well developed. And the storytelling of the Gospels is what grips the Christian imagination. And when you imagine the difference between the hard-hearted Jew, the banal Jew who doesn't care about anybody but himself, and you think of the Samaritan. Now, who's a Samaritan? So most people aren't familiar with who the Samaritans were. You think, the Samaritans are probably good people. Samaritans were our worst enemy. The Samaritans were a disaster from hell. The Samaritans, I'm not going to go into the history because it's well beyond the scope of this show, but the Samaritans were introduced to the land of Israel when the Assyrians carried off the 10 northern tribes in the first temple period. Their policy was to homogenize populations. When the Assyrians would conquer a nation, they wouldn't just subjugate the nation like other nations did, the Romans, but they would carry off the population to another land, and they would bring in another population to replace them. And this ensured that people wouldn't rebel. Why? Because they were in a new land, and they weren't connected to that land. They had no history in that land, and therefore people wouldn't rebel. What happened? When the 10 northern tribes were carried off, the Samaritans were brought in. They were brought in from another island. And they wanted to convert to Judaism. Whatever it was, the conversion wasn't accepted. They were the enemies of the Jews. They did everything to fight to make sure the second temple wouldn't be built. It didn't work. They were such enemies of the Jews. At one point, Samaritans went to the temple and they throw bones of dead bodies in the temple to make to render the temple defiled, so Jews couldn't worship there, because they would teach that the true holy place is Mount Gerizim, not Jerusalem. The Samaritans interfered with the Jewish calendar. It's beyond the scope, but they were our arch enemies. Now today, this identity has been lost. You would know this only if you really study history. So you'd be very aware that the Samaritans, if we turn the clock back 2,500 years, 2,200 years, the Samaritans were equal to our worst enemy. Much worse than the Romans or the Greeks, because with the Romans and Greeks, really, it generally wasn't it wasn't personal. With the Samaritans, it really was personal, with the exception of Antiochus Epiphanes IV. So the point is, the Samaritans were the arch enemy of the Jews. And to go and contrast the Samaritans, look how beautiful they are, in contrast to the Jew whose heart is hard, believe me, it poisons the minds of so many Christians. Now, I want to get to his question. I wanted to set that up because you have to be clear. Without knowing that, you wouldn't understand this question. So he's asking a very important question. This is what I'm going to address. And I've heard this from many Christians. We have in the Christian Bible all these very, very harsh statements about the Jews. 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 14 through 16. You have all these texts written to churches all over that Paul had created. And they're saying horrible things about the Jews, at the seat of the devil, John 8, and so on. I can go on and on. Believe me, Christians were not crazy when they concluded that the Jews were the enemies of anything that was good. Augustine was completely irrational when he wrote that vile drivel, the city of God, in the early 5th century. But the question he's asking, so what's the difference between that? Because this is sometimes Christians today have to defend the New Testament from the charge of being anti-Semitic. Why? Because today, in the 21st century, anti-Semitism is officially socially unacceptable. And therefore, if the Christian Bible is a anti-Semitic book, it can be the Word of God. It means it belongs in the heap with Mein Kampf and other despicable works. So some Christians will defend it, and I've heard this many times, and it's the kind of argument that at first glance appears to be interesting, and Christians will argue, why are you so against the condemnation of the Jews in the Christian Bible and in other church fathers who widely condemned the Jews. Justin did. They all did, one on top of the other. Tertullian wrote books. They wrote books again. They were a bunch of anti-Semites. There was no church father who liked Jews. None of them. That filthy church father Irenaeus, who was the bishop of Lyon, they all couldn't stand Jews. And if you don't believe it, go look up church fathers on the Jews, and you'll see you'll fall off your chair. But the argument goes, well, you have all these canonical and patristic writings in the church, and they're all very, very critical of Jews. But if you open up the book of Isaiah, it's also very critical of the Jews. You read Isaiah, this is his question. This is the question that has to be addressed. If you read Isaiah chapter 1, how does it begin? Isaiah is castigating the Jews for behaving badly and tells them about their iniquity and the sin, and you should have been like Sodom and Amorah, and if you raise your hands, God won't listen to you, and God says to them that I don't want your offerings and your offerings of your new moon. I don't want them. They're disgusting to me. And Jeremiah widely rips into the Jews. Read the opening few chapters of the book of Jeremiah, chapter 3, chapter 4. Believe me, you'll start shaking in your boots. You'll shake in your boots from these chapters. So they'll say, so what is the difference? The Jewish Bible, isn't that also, God forbid, anti-Semitic? Because it also is filled with very harsh criticisms of the Jews. In fact, one can say that one of the most central themes in the prophetic works in particular is the constant condemnation of the behavior of the Jewish people. It goes on and on and on with that. In fact, when the Jews do good, it frequently doesn't even mention it. I'll even go further. I'll surprise you. If you find texts in the Tanakh that are very flattering about the Jews, they're usually said by wicked people. Haman said to Achashverosh that there's one nation that they have their own Torah, their own law, and they follow that. That's quite a compliment. You won't find Isaiah saying that, but Haman did, right? And Korach, the rebeller against Moshe of blessed memory, said all the Jews are holy, right? We have a very strange thing that not only are the prophets very critical of Jews, but I could show you very frequently that the wicked people in Tanakh were very complimentary of the Jews. So what's going on over here? What is the difference then between criticism and anti-Semitism? And there's a much broader question. What is the difference between legitimate criticism and hate, hatred, and racism? What's the difference? The answer is we know there is a difference. Well, what is exactly the difference? And the answer, I think, and this is the question we're going to address here today, the difference should be crystallizing for you. When a great teacher, a prophet, when they criticized, they went right to the Jewish people and they said, you need to repent. Just like a mother says to her son, how are you behaving? Look, is this the way a Jew behaves? Is this the way a young man behaves? Is this the way a nice young man, a young man from Mexico behaves? Is this the way? So it's not a racist. The mother's trying to make the child better. That's the goal. Now, if I go to somebody else, if I go to the church that Paul created to somebody else, says, you know what they did? They, the Jews who both killed, the Jews are now third person. That's filthy anti-Semitic dribble. If you really care about someone, you tell them personally to their face, you need to be better. And you got to put away those cigarettes and stop taking drugs. You could do better than that. And the way you're behaving now is absolutely disgusting. That's how someone who loves. But if a parent will never go to a third party and say, you know what my son did? He's a filthy, disgusting Jew. He never would do that. But believe me, I had teachers who said to me, to my nose, is this how a Jew behaves? If I didn't behave correctly, believe it, I got it. But they would never go somebody else. They told me why, because they love me and want to make me better. So the difference between racism and the canards that are expressed in that venue is not for the purpose of making the person better. If you read Mein Kampf, Hitler wasn't interested in improving the Jews. He was interested in getting rid of the Jews. If you read the ranting and raving of Augustine, he wasn't writing a city of God. He wasn't addressing Jews. He was addressing people who lived in the empire, who just witnessed the collapse of Rome, the sacking of Rome in 410. And he had to explain how the heck did that happen if Rome turned to Christianity. I'm not going to go off in a whole tangent, but he wasn't writing to Jews. In these letters, in these texts, it's talking about them, about the Jews, in the third person. And that's what's disgusting. So therefore, the real criticism is, I want you to be better. That's a good thing. You're acting badly. That's not racism. That's not hate speech. That's love speech. And that's why, incidentally, the prophets are critical of the Jews. Why? Lama. For what purpose? Because they wanted to make us better. That's why. Because Yeshayahu loved the Jewish people and wanted to shape the Jewish people that they should be a Or Lagoyim, a light to the nations. How would a nation who is not connecting with God, because perhaps they were keeping kosher, certainly, but there wasn't social justice, and they were not feeding the hungry and clothing the naked and caring for the most vulnerable members of society. So he said, change your ways. And then he says in chapter 1, the same chapter, he says, if you'll in fact change your ways and care for the orphan, then although your sins are as red as scarlet, I'll make them, they will become as white as snow. Come, let us reason together. So Isaiah is filled with love. This explains also why is it that wicked people in Tanakh, I'm not going to go through it all, but a lot of wicked people said a lot of nice things about Jews. And the question is why? Why would Haman ever compliment the Jews that they follow the Torah? The answer is that Haman had no interest in making the Jewish people better. They weren't interested in it. They were not interested in proving the Jew. They were interested in, they had other issues. Korach wasn't interested in making the Jewish people a better nation. He was very jealous, and his pride was his destruction, was his fall, and therefore he didn't mind saying what he was observing. Look at Wil'lam, Harasha, the wicked prophet Wil'lam, who said, Ma tovu alecha Yaakov, look how you tend. The wicked people are saying nice things. Right. The answer is that wicked people were not interested in making the Jewish people better, so they called the shots the way they saw it. But a good parent, a good father, a good teacher, a good messenger, a great prophet, he's not interested in these empty, these superlatives, oh, you're so good. Then I understand why. How is that going to make you better? How is that going to make you spiritually stronger? They're not interested in that. The purpose of Tanakh, the prophets were doctors. They had no new mitzvah to add to the Torah. Their whole purpose was to refine the children of Israel so they would follow God, and as a result, they would raise the world, because the purpose of the central mandate of the children of Israel is what? To be Or Lagoyim, a light to the nations. Right. The central role is to be a priestly nation, a mamlechus kahana, v'goy kadosh, a king of priests, and because the whole world belongs to me, Exodus chapter 19. And the whole purpose of the Jew is to raise up the rest of the world. But a nation to carry out such a mandate has to be refined, has to turn back to God. And you don't turn back to God by being told, well, how nice you are, but by pointing out the mistakes you're making so that you improve and become better. And that's the difference between raw, filthy racism and criticism that's designed to make you spiritually healthy. That is a great question. Thank you so much for calling in.
Excellent, excellent. Okay. Hey, something I was just thinking about, I want to ask everybody out there, if you are friends with David Kahn on Facebook, his wife, Joan, has had cancer, and I think they just checked in, or no, they just got discharged from a hospital on Wednesday. But anyway, yeah, so even if you see this video a year from now, if you, don't mind, just pray for Joan and David Kahn, so that'd be awesome. All right, so, okay, so the phone lines are still open. We don't have anybody on hold, so I'm going to go and fall back on another question. Let me put that back up here that we've got. I don't remember if this was a called-in converted to text or if it just came through text, but here it is nonetheless. Let me pull it up here. And, okay, here we go. Sorry about that. I had it on screen, but then when I saw that post, I switched over. Okay, question for the show. Not sure if this is the venue for questions for Rabbi Tovia Singer. If not, please let me know. Okay, so I would like to know what the Tanakh teaches regarding God's sovereignty, man's will versus God's will, and predestination. I know the Christian perspective. Actually, we may come back to this. I want to take this call. Caller, welcome to the show, and please tell us your name and where you're calling from.
This is Janine Foster from Corpus Christi, Texas.
Hi, Janine. Welcome back.
Yes, well, I have a question about Chabad. What is Chabad and Orthodox? What is the difference of Orthodox Chabad and Orthodox?
Okay.
I know it sounds crazy, but
no, that's fine. That's a pretty simple question, Rabbi. So you basically want to know what is the difference between regular Judaism and the Chabad version of Judaism? Is that kind of?
yes. I mean, I kind of think they're different than regular Orthodox. Are they or are they not?
Okay, great. We'll pass this to Rabbi, and we'll get right on it. And for all you callers out there, anytime you actually hear another caller on, or if you see this thing pop up on your screen, which I'm going to put up now, if you call in, I won't be able to get your call. So if you see this pop up on your screen, basically, caller on hold. If you call in while that blue strip is up there, I won't be able to get your call. So just wait till that goes away and just fit your timing in between calls. So, Janine, thank you for that question, and we will let you go so you can watch the answer on air. Okay. Okay. Shalom.
Okay.
There we go. Now they're calling in. Okay, caller, sit tight. Do not hang up. It might take 15, 20 minutes. It might take 5 minutes. I don't know. Just sit tight. Don't hang up. We will get to your call. Okay, Rabbi, take it away.
Okay. So the very fast answer to that question is there is no difference in Chabad. Well, Chabad is a movement that began in the 18th century. It was founded in the late 18th century by a great rabbi, Rav Shneir Zalman of Liadi, and the name Chabad is an acronym for Chochmah, Bina, V'das, wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. So I want to present this properly. So all Jews who identify as Orthodox, and at the time that this Hasidic movement began, that term Orthodox did not exist, believe the same thing. There is no core doctrinal difference between what an Orthodox Jew who's a member of Chabad believes, an Orthodox Jew whose family is Lithuanian. Those are the type of schools that I studied in, going to yeshiva, like the Mir Yeshiva is a Lithuanian school. There's no difference in a Jew who comes from Yemen, and Jews have been living in Yemen since the time of destruction of the first temple. The same thing goes for a Jew from Iraq. Now, there are no Jews left in Iraq, and for the most part, there are no Jews left in Yemen, because unfortunately, Iraq, for all intents and purposes, it's a country that pretty much has been destroyed and shattered by war, and the Jews of Yemen have fled. So there's virtually no Jews left. But for a very long time, Jews lived in these countries, very large communities. We're talking of thousands of years to the time of the prophetic period. And there's no doctrinal difference between what a Jew from Baghdad believes, a Jew from Yemen believes, and a Jew who's a member of the Chabad community believes, which is a Hasidic community. Our fundamental tenets are identical. And you'll go, what does traditional Judaism believe? So the most well-known summary of Judaism's fundamental teachings are summarized by Maimonides, who's one of the greatest rabbis in Jewish history. Maimonides lived in the 12th century. He was born in Spain, and he passed away in Egypt. He's buried today in Tiberias. And Maimonides codified 13 principles of faith, or the Shloisha Esrei Ikrei Ha'amuna, the 13 fundamentals of faith, mean the same thing, are most well known. And any person who denies any of those principles is a heretic and is not an observant Jew, or is ignorant. And in that case, God, doesn't always hold people accountable. They don't know any better. But every believing Jew must believe in those principles, that there is one God, that there is no God besides Hashem, there's no oneness like Hashem, there's no existence outside Hashem, that the Torah of Moshe Rabbeinu is supreme, it's perfect, that Moses is the chief of all prophets, continuing on to the end of days, the belief in the coming of Mashiach, and the belief in the resurrection of the dead. So all Jews who identify as Orthodox must believe that, must believe those principles. However, in the 18th century, there emerged in Eastern Europe and in Russia and other parts, not Western Europe, a Hasidic community that emphasized certain aspects of Judaism. No one was inventing anything new. The Hasidic community, which Chabad is a part of, was simply, I'm overgeneralizing it, but I want to make this easy. It was simply emphasizing joy and rejoicing in Judaism. And it was an extremely popular movement because there were many Jews who were not great scholars and intellectual giants who wanted to connect to their faith. But as it turned out, at the time, the 18th century, the time that saw the great giants of scholarship emerging, but the plain milkman and the simple. So this emerged, this movement that did not create anything new. That's what's important, but would emphasize aspects of Judaism, of its joy, of studying its mysticism, and so on, and its great teachings. But there is nothing new. Any movement that introduces a new commandment is complete heresy. Any movement that denies any of these fundamental teachings, but they might emphasize certain aspects. There are some traditions and customs that are slightly different, and so on. So that's the plain thing. And there have been 7 Hasidic masters that emerged from Chabad. The last is the most famous, the famed Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, who I had the opportunity to meet on many occasions. He was an extraordinary man of God, and he became the 7th Rebbe in, I think it was 1951. And he was a giant in scholarship and knowledge, and it can be said, during a difficult time in the 20th century, mid-20th, late 20th century, when knowledge of Torah, and this is after the Holocaust, when there was a decline, he really was one of the giants who revived the observance and commitment to the Torah, and he was a very special human being. Now, I know I'm going to have 500 emails if I don't mention this. I usually don't mind the 500, but I'll say it now. When he was alive, many of his followers thought that he might be the Messiah. Some of them were convinced that he was the Messiah, and they were waiting for him to announce it. He never said that he was the Messiah, but people felt, and I am not a member of that Hasidic sect, but he was the kind of person that everybody loved. So there were people who felt that if you look at what kind of personality does the Mashiach have, it seemed like this is the kind of person who has those characters. Not that he is, but he looks like he might be. And if he isn't, it's someone who has that kind of character, who spreads the knowledge of Hashem and so on. But some people, I think, became more obsessed, which can happen with such a great person, become obsessed with the messenger rather than the message. And that did happen. And some people said he absolutely is the Messiah. And in fact, when he became ill later on, he had stroke, and it seemed like there was no way he would recover. They said he would recover, and then he would proclaim as the Messiah, miraculously recover, and then he died. And then some of his followers then said, well, surely he's going to resurrect. So there is that aspect of it that was controversial. I think it's personally, I think it's really unfortunate. I like to think that it's a minority and that this idea is waning, but that's the only controversial aspect, that there is a sect that believes that he is the Messiah. Although I think it's waning, I don't think it's that prominent anymore. But he was certainly one of the greatest people I had ever met in my life. And I had the opportunity to meet with him many times, and he was a great teacher. But there is no doctrinal difference between Chabad and any other Orthodox group. Different Orthodox groups may emphasize different aspects, may emphasize modesty, emphasize certain aspects, but there is no doctrinal difference. Lahavdil elef alfei avdolos, as you find in Christianity, where they argue over fundamental tenets of the nature of God. We never had such a thing. Or what is included in Tanakh, this doesn't exist. Or was Moses the supreme prophet? This never happened. None of those things exist. So Chabad is an Orthodox Jewish group.
Gotcha.
Okay.
That's cool. I'm glad you covered the part. And you know, I've heard the same thing about it waning. I've met a couple people who are Chabad, and they said that we thought. So not we think, but we thought. You know, so the waning idea definitely is for sure happening. I don't know to what degree, but still. Okay, caller, welcome to the show. Please tell us your name. Pardon me. Please tell us your name and where you're coming from, or calling from. Excuse me.
Hey, Rabbi and William, how are you? This is Danny Harper.
Hey, Danny Harper. Welcome to the show. What's the question for Rabbi?
Hey, question. These are two general questions that maybe Rabbi Singer can answer.
Give us your most important one. Give us your
the
most.
Okay,
Pick the one of the two you'll want the best, because we got a lot of callers calling in. Okay.
So as a Baal Tshuva myself, can the rabbi talk a bit about how someone like myself, who has many non-Jewish friends, family, coworkers, what is the best way to integrate with the non-Jewish world and still remain and keep my Jewish identity?
Okay, first explain Baal Tshuva. I'm asking Rabbi, of course, so that all the viewers will understand, and then also help us understand your. So, did you convert to Judaism? Are you Jewish now?
No, I'm a Jew. I just.
Oh, you are a Jew. Okay, so Baal Tshuva. Okay.
Yeah, I'm a Jew.
Okay, but you have a lot of Christian friends, or you're around a lot of non-Jewish people.
Yeah.
Yeah, could you refine your question just for me a little bit, because that was very vague and what do you do? What are the circumstances? Who specifically? Just because I don't want to, get really broad. It will be easier to
narrow it down. Yeah.
Yeah. Would you do that for me?
Okay. So with regard, let's just an example would be, if I want to go to a coffee shop or something that's not kosher per se, but I want to wear my kippah and study Torah in that place. Is that a holy place to do those things? Is it appropriate? If I want to talk to non-Jews at other places outside about Judaism, is that also, is that appropriate as well? That kind of thing. Does that make sense?
I think so. I'm going to answer you very broadly, but thank you very much for your question, and I'll do my best to address your...
Okay, great question. Thanks for calling in.
Okay.
All right. Okay, phone lines are back open. If you want to call in, I'll put you on hold, so you'll be the next one up. Rabbi?
So, I don't know. I mean, I thought coffee shops do serve bottle of orange juice. I don't know of any prohibition for a religious Jew to be in Starbucks and having whatever. That stuff is kosher. The point is that the question is, who is learning from who? Who is the teacher? Who is the student? So the role of the Jew is to be a light to the nations, to be a mamleches kohanim v'goy kadosh, which means that we are to reflect how the nations are to worship God. We're supposed to reflect that to the world, to be an or lagoyim, Isaiah chapter 49, verse 6. And believe me, Isaiah worked very, very hard and criticized the Jews very heavily because they were not living up to that standard, which the Jews had to live up to. They had to be a light to the nations so that the words of Zechariah 8:23 could be fulfilled. The 10 people of different nations would grab the shirt of a Jew and say, "Take us with you, because now we heard that God is with you." So, and that the nations will go by your light, arise and shine, Isaiah chapter 60, and so on. So, but the key is that the Jews should always be a light to the nations, but we shouldn't conversely imitate the ways of the nation. The Torah says in Leviticus chapter 20, verse 23, "Lo yiselchu b'chukas hagoyim," which means that you should not imitate, "Lo yiselchu b'chukas hagoyim," you should not imitate the customs and the ways of the nations, those who are not Jewish. Now, what does that mean? I want to be very specific here. The term that's used there is "Lo yiselchu b'chukas hagoyim." So what is a chok? So a chok is a type of law. And it's a type of law that has no rational explanation. So there are mishpatim that we understand. And certainly if you live in the United States has many great laws that are really based on the teachings of Judaism. And those laws one should uphold, and so on. All these wonderful laws in the United States. But if there are any silly customs in America where people on Halloween dress up in all kinds of costumes and go trick-or-treating, it's absolutely, because that doesn't have a rational explanation. So that's completely forbidden. And what you should do is you should be an example to people that you shouldn't run around and dress up like all these things and running around in what's All Saints Day. It's really an ancient Druid holiday, and in any way take part in these activities. So the key point is, if, of course, there are righteous, upright non-Jews who are teaching science and so on, it's absolutely fine. You'll study in university with you'll have professors that are not Jewish. They teach math. It's fine, that's absolutely terrific. But when it comes to the customs and mores of the nations of the world, the Jew has to be the light of the nations. The Jew has to be an example of how to worship the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. Now, am I suggesting that the vast majority of Jews live up to this standard? The answer is no, that it's a remnant of those who are faithful, those who are loyal. And what I'm saying is not me trying to do damage control or prevent 5,000 emails coming to me and say, "Oh, look at, and all these guys in Hollywood and all this garbage." I'm not suggesting that, because it's only a remnant that is faithful. Read Zephaniah chapter 3, verse 12 through 16, that describes the faithful remnant of Israel. What kind of a nation would that be? Read it for yourself. I won't even tell you. But when you read it, you go, this is a beautiful thing. So the answer is that, of course, Jews and non-Jews, they study all kinds of sciences and math and hard sciences. That's fine. But a Jew should be careful, number one, not to learn from the customs of the nations of the world. The customs, these ideas, that's absolutely forbidden. Don't try to imitate them. Don't try to wear the latest fashion, whatever they come out of Paris, the latest thing, because they wear a white tie, they wear a thin tie. You don't have to go imitate the nations of the world. It's not. You don't have to go change your style dress because they did some parasite in Paris decided that you should wear long stockings, short ties, high hats, low nose. Forget all that stuff. So we don't do that. We don't try to imitate. It doesn't mean that we walk around looking, but we don't go running around with all these things. We don't go running around imitating the ways of the world. We are instead supposed to be an example to the world, and therefore it certainly would be a very great thing to be in Starbucks, to open up an orange juice, Tropicana, whatever they sell there, and make out loud, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam Shehakol Nihiyeh B'Dvaroi. And somebody may say Amen. Another person will ask you, what are you saying? So you'll explain to them that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the creator, and he is the one that everything came into this world through his word, Psalm 33, verse 6. And if you're in a Starbucks, ask someone there who's, whether Jewish or not, say, would you like some food? Would you like some nice, whatever it is, apple juice? And you'll give them apple juice, and they'll go, thank you very much. They'll say, thank you for the apple juice. And what you say to them is, don't thank me. It's Hashem that created the apples. And the apples come from the Almighty. Blessed be his holy name. And to him is all the thanks belong. Where did this practice come from? This I didn't invent. This is what Abraham, of blessed memory, our father, and the great prophet, who doesn't love Avraham Avinu, this is what he used to do. He used to invite strangers to his home and perform acts of kindliness. And then when people would thank him for his acts of kindness, he said, don't thank me. It's from him, thank him. And that's why, incidentally, there's the mitzvah to thank God for your food is really after you eat. Torah says you should eat me satisfied and then thank the Lord your God. The essential mitzvah of Scripture is the blessing after you eat. The one before you eat is a rabbinic tradition. Why after you eat? Because this is what Abraham did. This is how Abraham would share his faith. He would go, come in, eat, enjoy. He would prepare all kinds of food. Then, of course, they would thank him. He said, don't thank me, thank him. So that's how you should act. But don't imitate the customs of nations. That's absolutely forbidden. But rather be an example. If you wear a yarmulke on your head, if you identify, someone can look at you and say, oh, this is a religious Jew. So make sure you behave in a way that's a Kiddush Hashem. And you don't have to walk around in Duggar blue jeans like you're harvesting wheat. Dress like a person should. For those of you who harvest wheat, I don't mean anything. But I'm just saying, you should act as an example for the rest of the world and don't imitate the mores of the world. Let the world imitate the ways of the Jewish people, which is the Torah. And when I say the Jewish people, I don't mean Bernie Madoff, and I don't mean these guys. You know, I'm not talking about people who really fear Hashem and love the Torah. So thank you for that question.
Very good, very good. Okay, let's get on with the next caller. Actually, in just a second. First things first, if you don't have Rabbi's books, Let's Get Biblical. I'm so used to quoting our name of our show. Let's Get Biblical, 2-part series available on Amazon, and you can find them. I'm gonna pull up your toviasinger.tv too, because I just love that website. Okay, so I'm just going to show you this for those of you who have never seen this before. Did I not do that right? It's toviasinger.tv, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there it is. Oh, that's right. I didn't type it in all the way. Okay. My internet's coming through. There we go. Beautiful. Okay, whoops. I got to put up the right. There we go. So this is a really cool resource. Rabbi has on here all of his, pretty much all of his content, going to through different resources like John and Jason, spiritualbabies.net, things like that. You can find everything Rabbi Singer has done on this website, toviasinger.tv. It's very easy to remember. You also should subscribe to his YouTube channel as well. You can join those members. And then also, if you don't have the audio, Rabbi, is there any news on the 24-part CD? Is that something that's going to come back out or not?
You know, we might. It just became really expensive to produce. It's audios that are available free, so you don't need to buy it. But in truth, people did want to own the CDs, but to produce a package of 24 CDs was so expensive that we would just have to charge so much money for it, because it was just such an expensive project that I just couldn't bring myself to engage in that. It would also meant putting out a lot of money that we would have to produce them like 1,000 at a time,
right?
And it was enormously expensive. So I don't, download it for free if you want, if you believe in the work that would. If you are a Christian or if you believe in Christianity in any way, do not make a donation. Okay, I just come to our website outreachrooms.org and please study. All the audios are free downloads. And do not donate money.
OutreachJudaism.org.
.org. Yes. If you're not a Christian and you're a Jew or a Benoach and you believe in what we're doing and you think that our organization is doing work that is very valuable, then of course you might want to consider supporting our organization. I never ask when I don't like it, but I just want to make that clear. If you're a Christian or in the middle, please just come, study. It's there. We're not running a business here. We're not selling Torah. We're not selling a relationship with God. And the audio programs are free for anyone to download, and I welcome you to come to our site. There's a wealth of information.
Okay, so I've got on the screen here where it says free audio from OutreachJudaism.org. You can see all the tabs at the top: home, support us, about us, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so free audio. Click on that. It'll take you to this page. If you want to download all of them all at once, then click over on any of these sides you'll see here. It says, and I did this myself. I think I donated like $20 because I wanted all of them in one spot. So I just did this, and so I have all these on my phone, so you can listen to them on the go. But each one of these have a title that correlates directly with this 2-volume book set. So if you don't have any of the audio, but you do have the book set, I strongly urge you that when you read this book, open up your YouTube, go here, and find the matching title and play this either before or after you read each section, because it's additional information. It's not an audio book of the book itself. This is completely different information that he highlights on the same topics and on the same verses that he mentioned. So if you have never done it before, you're completely missing out, like kissing God through a towel, right, Rabbi? So anyway, so we'll move on back with the caller. Caller, welcome to the show. Please tell us your name and where you're calling from.
Hey, William. I'm Michael calling you from Florida.
Michael from Florida. Welcome to the show. Thank you for calling. What's the question for Rabbi?
Huge greetings first to you and Rabbi Singer. I'm proud to say that I started listening to Let's Get Biblical around episode 40.
Oh.
And have diligently stayed with you. I went back and listened to all the prior episodes, and it was our pleasure also to donate to you and Rabbi Singer from time to time.
Wonderful. Thank you.
What we did was you were a source I just found. I don't want to say by happenstance, but you know what I mean.
Sure.
I was looking around trying to find sources for Noahide and other righteous non-Jew teachings. And in the course of that, Rabbi Singer has obviously covered some topics more than once. But as he covered those core topics, I'd make it a point to go search for other material, and even took a class for a little while to learn more about conversion. And I realized that we have a huge gap in our community, of which, William, I know you're part, and that is that we don't really have well-established learning centers. We're not quite ready for the temple,
right?
Although I'm sure we're welcome in many of them. Local kabbats are approachable. But as far as having a place we could go and learn in a manner that a rabbi would teach, which I esteem at levels I can't describe. Let's say, I know this sounds a little far-fetched, but let's say someone had a big chunk of cash. That's always nice, right?
Yeah.
And bought some land that was as close to a kabbat or a temple as possible, and parsed it out, gave it away to people who'd like to come there, maybe temporarily put up a trailer, build a home, and build a Noahide community, and then contract with a local rabbi to come in and teach organized classes that would go through like you would any type of a learning process.
Right.
Because for me, if I'm an example, everything I learn is in a hodgepodge of info. I go to this lesson, I view this video, and again, I've diligently followed 300 hours of the rabbi, and I noticed all the ways he endears a Noahide. But endearing us is one thing. Having guidance and having our own rabbi to work with where they're there to teach us specifically. Could you give any guidance on how a lay person with a dream could maybe make that happen?
Where do you live? I missed that. What city?
Yeah.
Where do you?
Well, I live in North Florida, and it's very rural. And while I may be overstating, but while I do have the means to relocate into a Jewish community down South Florida, really this area of our state has such deep needs. Rural North Florida, the poverty, the sexual exploitation. I could just go on and on. The work I'm in is prevention media. So although I may not be the perfect example to go to the community I'm describing, I could always buy a house there and commute, kind of a thing. I just want to have a source to go to other than online where I can learn to either move toward conversion, satisfy the needs of being a righteous non-Jew with myself and my family. Forgive me, I'm preaching now.
So your question, Tony, I'm guessing is, what can you do to get better learning that's more fitting for us meaning those who have not converted to Judaism? Maybe we want to, maybe we're going to, but we haven't, and we've left the Christian church behind. We no longer subscribe to the New Testament. So your question is, what's the best thing that we can do for getting a consistent, like, thorough teaching that's dedicated to the Noahide?
I understand this question.
Well, and one small addition.
Okay.
I read recently that the Rambam said that before the Messianic era exploded, that the righteous non-Jew, the ger and the gates, would be a prominent fixture. Well, we need it, and I want to be part of it, and I want to help expand it and promote it, and most importantly, I want to learn from a rabbi what we're supposed to do.
Cool. Tony, thank you, man.
Guys.
I appreciate it. Take care. You know, that has been coming up a lot. People saying the Noahides left out. The ones who are not no converts or not Jewish, we're left out. We're left to look over the street corner to try to find some information that we can like absorb. No one's actually teaching us directly. There's no rabbis that are willing to actually take on teaching the Noahide, or the one who is not a convert. People don't like that term Noahide. A lot of them don't, but the ger. So what do you do? Rabbi?
Yeah. So let me talk about Florida for a moment.
Yeah.
I remember many years ago that I did a series of lectures in South Florida, in the greater Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and Hollywood, that whole area. And then I had some lectures in northern Florida, in the Panhandle. And I thought to myself, and in Jacksonville, which is, I think we're Interstate 10 and 95. So I thought to myself, well, it would take longer to fly, because by the time you have to get the airport early, and then you have to thing, and then you get on a plane. What's the point? It's only a few hundred miles. Drive up Florida and do your lectures there. And I was really shocked as a New Yorker to see southern Florida, which has something in the order of like 1.5 million Jews, and a very, very large Orthodox community, in whether it's Hollywood and Miami and all these areas. I mean, just Fort Lauderdale, huge centers of Torah study, and many, some of the most gifted rabbis, teachers in Southern Florida. And frankly, when I drove north and I passed, you go up, passing Orlando, I don't remember all the names of these cities, and you go up there, and in Pensacola, it's like not another state, it's like another country. I don't even know how they both share the same Florida. It's a whole completely different world. In fact, in the northern Florida, they talk with a real southern accent. In the south, they all sound like they're from Brooklyn. So I want to tell you really what a person should do. The Torah, after all, is Mayim Chaim. It's living water. It's not, the Torah is the fountain of the living water. Judaism is not a broken cistern that can hold no water. Now, of course, there's some people who have a lot of wealth and so on. They can start a whole community, but 99% of people can't do such a thing, and it's a very lengthy process. So I would ask you the question. I say it to you, love. I don't just. It seems obvious to me that if I lived in a place that, although northern Florida has plenty of water, physical water, northern Florida doesn't really have a lot of spiritual water. There's, in fact, a tremendous amount of idolatry up in northern Florida, in the Panhandle. And there's a lot of things that are very, very foreign to Torah in that place. So what would you do if you were in northern Florida and there was no water and there was a desert? You would say, this is not, let's go to a place where there's water, where we can drink. And you wouldn't people wouldn't live in the Mojave Desert and wouldn't live in the Sahara. People would say, let me move to a place where there is water. So in the same way, you are very fortunate today as a person who loves the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that you have access to such a wealth of information that you can go on YouTube and watch many very gifted rabbis teaching Torah, and that was never accessible. I don't have to tell you, this is a phenomenon that's amazing. People could, and not only that, you can go and in the old days, 30 years ago, if you weren't completely conversant in Hebrew and you weren't a student in the yeshiva, there was almost nothing accessible, almost nothing was available to you. And if you didn't master our sacred texts in the original biblical Hebrew and the writings of the great Summa commentators, you had very little. There was almost almost nothing available. But today, because there is a tremendous movement of repentance, of tshuva, of turning back to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, both among Jews, and also an inordinate number of people who, to the best of their knowledge, are not Jewish, who are becoming B'nai Noach, which means that they are embracing the faith of Judaism without converting to Judaism. So there is today the largest Jewish publisher in the world, as an example, is ArtScroll. I show you, I don't get a commission. What they do, they have so many scholars that they've hired, and their books, which are packed with a translation, not just of the text that we always had, meaning of Tanakh, but of the super commentaries. And the super commentaries, they, frankly, if you take like Rashi and the great medieval commentators, the Ibn Ezra and the Radak and all these giants of the past, even if you understood Hebrew, you probably would be lost in what they were saying, because they were essentially writing in a very terse, in a scholarly way, where they presuppose that you knew an enormous amount of information. Maimonides is quite exceptional that I can't go into the history of the 12th century in the world he lived in, but he was able to, perhaps the greatest mind of the rabbis since Moses, one of the great giants, was able to somehow write in a way that was so accessible. It's really astonishing that one of the most brilliant people that ever lived was able to write for any person to understand. Really a stunning mind that's almost impossible to imagine. But really, even if you were able to open up Rashi and read it and understand the words, you wouldn't, in most cases, wouldn't understand what Rashi is really speaking about, because Rashi presupposes that you know all these things, and his commentaries are famously very, very terse, very tight, just a few words, and he assumes you. So what ArtScroll's done is not just translate all the Mefarshim, but they've also elucidated it. They filled in all the missing thoughts that these great rabbis just took for granted you knew. The point is that you have access to a wealth of scholarship today that was inaccessible just 30, 40 years ago. Just nothing like that existed. But I won't mislead you, and that is that it's best for someone, I think you raised a very valid point, but it's best for someone who is following the Jewish faith, whether as someone who converts to Judaism, which means that they're actually joining the nation of Israel, or they are embracing Judaism as a faith but not converting to Judaism as a ger tzedek. In either case, if you're in a place that's a spiritual desert, what would you do? You do the same thing you would do in a place that's a physical desert, even more so. If you're in a place where there is no water, if North Florida was a desert like the Sahara, like the Painted Desert, you would get on 95 and go south and go where there's plenty of water. So in truth, really the best thing is to go, whether you can go to South Florida, you can go to Memphis, Tennessee, Atlanta, Georgia, certainly north, come to the land of Israel. There are massive centers of great rabbi scholarship in the United States, but North Florida is very limited in that way. And if you're looking for great sources of rabbis that are accessible, that are live, not over the internet, the truth is that's what if I said anything else to you, I wouldn't be honest with you. I might be saying what you want to hear, but in truth, there is no replacement for not just being live in the presence of a rabbi, but being connected to the Jewish community, to be a part of a religious, committed Jewish community, to be part of the Machne Israel, to be a part of the camp of Israel. It's really an important thing, not to be in a spiritual wilderness. So that's the real answer. If someone tells you anything else besides what I just said, they're mistaken.
Right.
If you have a deep, deep love for the Torah HaKadosha, to you, the words Torah Hashem Tamima, the Torah of God is perfect. Meshivas Nefesh, it restores the soul. Eidus Hashem Ne'amono, the testimony of God is trustworthy. Machimas Pesi, it makes the foolish person wise. You take that very seriously. So if you go to a place where there's water, don't remain in a spiritual desert. That's the truth. If you can, if you have the means to do that, you have this big parcel of land, you certainly sell it and move and go to a place where there's plenty of Torah. That's really you belong.
Awesome.
Shouldn't. Okay? So that's my recommendation.
Very good. Very good. All right, let's move on to the next caller. Caller, welcome to the show. Please tell us your name and where you're calling from.
How you doing? My name is Sean. I'm calling from New Jersey.
Hey, Sean, welcome to the show.
Shalom, Rabbi.
Very good.
Thank you. This is my first time actually calling. I watch the show a lot, and I follow the rabbi on different social feeds. I'm on his Facebook as well. Rabbi, I've been living as a Jew for a few years. I've been studying for longer than that. I have my own library at home and things of that nature. But I am a young man, person of color, and I've been trying to convert to Judaism for quite some time. But I have not found a welcoming situation for me. I've been kind of given the cold shoulder for many years. Then I don't really know what direction to go. My studies is, like I said, I've been studying for quite some time. It's just the conversion. I've been having trouble finding someone that would be accepting to someone like myself. And I've been in a few situations where, let's just say, that was unethical, which made me not, return to the synagogues and things of that nature. So I'm in between just in a situation where I really feel bad, because sometimes it does break your faith a little bit, you know what I mean? Spirituality starts to go down, but I have belief in Hashem, and I try to just keep the faith, and hopefully some doors will open up for me, one day, so I can go, convert to Judaism, so to make it official. But I live my life as a Jew. I keep kosher. I keep Sabbath. I study pretty much 3 to 4 days a week. I don't watch TV. I'm a very humble individual. I just want to finalize the lifestyle that I live.
Stay on the phone just for a minute, my friend. Rabbi, and I'm asking also the caller too, Sean. Are you asking, is there a certain advice on where you should go to convert if you're having trouble in the area you're in? And if so, what area are you in? I'm not really sure thoroughly. I know you're having a difficult time converting because of possibly not necessarily racism, but I mean, I know that, hey, listen, my son-in-law is black, and I love him. My adopted daughter is Spanish, so we have a very mixed family here. So, and I know what it means to get shunned because of your color. I've seen it happen to my son-in-law, and it's heartbreaking. But and then this is even by people who are not even racist. They just don't feel comfortable around someone they're not used to being around. So is your question, what can you do? Where can you go? Is that kind of where you're going with your question?
Yes, like if the rabbi could give me some advice. So like I said, I'm actually really excited that I actually get to speak with the rabbi, because I'm such a big fan of his.
Right.
And So I just did some advice from the rabbi. That would be.
Well,
very
stay on the
helpful.
phone. Why don't you talk with Rabbi for a minute? Rabbi, y'all can...
Well, let me address this question.
Okay.
I have to confess. First of all, Sean, bless you,
Thank you, Sean.
my dear brother. And I just want to say that for the first time, I think, since I've been on air, I've heard something that's very, very foreign to me. It means that in Judaism, this color is just blank. It has
Right.
no meaning at all. What color your eyes are, what color your hair is. Now, I'm not saying that we don't have nut jobs. For sure. We have Hollywood has plenty of Jews with fancy Jewish names that are out of their minds. And we don't have, everybody has crazies. I have never, in the land of Israel, in Eretz Israel, you have the only nation in history that ever went to the African continent and brought people who are black out to give them freedom when Israel brought out Ethiopian Jews. In Israel, you have rabbis and great giants in Torah. It's I'm maybe the opposite. I'm like in Indonesia. Many members of my congregation are not white, and if a white person goes, "Oh God, a white guy," so it's
That's funny.
I'll just say this to you. This is very foreign to me. My uncle, my aunt, they marched with Dr. King, going back to in his civil rights movement of blessed memory. My grandmother never raised her voice at me and always showed me love. And my father is an amazing teacher. But I think if I ever wanted to, I can't even fathom I think the only thing that would flip them out is if anything racist would ever come out of my mouth. I can't even imagine it. So I just want to say this, that I'm very sorry that you encountered a nut job. We don't have a monopoly on normal people, but just stay away from them. But this is certainly not the norm. My understanding is, and this number could be off, I don't know, but I think in the United States there are over 80,000 Jews who are black.
Yes,
but
I just haven't ran across a lot of them. I spoke to one rabbi.
Where do you live? Where do you hang out? What do you like? You live next to a Ku Klux Klan rally? Where the heck do you live in Idaho? Where do you live? Where do you live? Do you live? If you live on a Klan's next to a Klan's place, then maybe you might want to move. But
no, I'm actually I'm not too far. I'm about 20 minutes north of Lakewood, and you know Lakewood has a huge Jewish community. I can't hear you.
We're still here.
Yes. Look, when I went, I'll just say this. I'm sure we have Jews that are all kinds of people. You know, we have our thing. I don't need to speak about them. They're in the news every day who do all kinds of crazy stuff. But in Lakewood, they have many rabbis who are black there. When I went to Yeshiva in the Mir, one of my chavrusas, one of my study partners was black, and his brother was there, and it was just a zero, just a blank. Black means nothing. Moses' wife was black. It just doesn't mean anything. It's just what color is your hair? What color? My congregation in Indonesia, the majority of them are not Caucasian. So it just, what you're saying doesn't surprise me. There's no question there's some crazy Jew out there. We have, everybody's got nut jobs. But frankly, it's just unfortunate you would meet someone like that. If you're 20 minutes north of Lakewood, so Lakewood's like, what, exit like 90-something on the Garden State Parkway?
I'm actually
What's that?
I'm 102 on the Parkway.
You're 102, so you're right in between there. So what I would do is just get around more normal people and either go a little south on the Garden State Parkway, go a little north. We have the Long Branch community, a large Sephardic Jewish community. You'll have a very, very big welcome there. So you're just right in between. I don't know who's there. I'm not an expert in New Jersey, but I know everybody lives on an exit. And you might be a little bit in between. So you can go a little
There you
north, you can go south, a little south to Lakewood, go up north to Bergen County, which has a very large, thriving Jewish community. Lakewood is oriented. Has this a huge, very Orthodox community, but it sort of revolves around the Lakewood Yeshiva, which is the largest rabbinical school outside of the land of Israel. There are thousands of students, and the community is huge. But I think, and maybe I'll get some mail on this that I'm wrong, although I have a lot of students in Lakewood who enjoy the show, Lakewood is kind of oriented to Jews who are already Orthodox and are producing scholars, generally speaking. I think. I'm not sure. I haven't been to Lakewood in so many years. My father studied in Lakewood many, many years ago when Rav Aaron Cutler, Zechrein Livracha, was alive, who was the founder of the yeshiva. But so you might just wanted a community that's more oriented to outreach. I don't know if Lakewood is that kind of community, because Lakewood may be, because it, and I'm surely going to get 50 emails on this, that Lakewood has all kinds of things. I don't know that it's oriented towards taking care of conversion and so on. I don't know. It certainly wouldn't be my first thought. My first thought would be to go a little north, or to go up to Bergen County. We have I think the county with the largest Jewish community and largest Orthodox community in New Jersey, and Passaic, New Jersey, exit 153 on the Garden State Parkway. Passaic has a huge Jewish community, huge. I don't know how many synagogues are there. They're just enormous, and yeshivas are there, and converts are there. I mean, just packed. So I think that's really where you ought to be. I wouldn't be on exit 102. It's just not the thing. And I've got to tell you this, that in your life, you're going to suffer. And I want you to know, if someone says to you, Sean, I'll give you $10,000 for the reward you're going to get for every time you suffered, don't sell it. Because if you suffer for Hashem, it's a great thing. I don't wish suffering on anybody. But if you suffer like Abraham went through great difficulties, and Isaac, great difficulties, and Jacob, wow, they had difficult lives. Believe me, what they put up with. But they endured the vicissitudes, and that's why they became great. So I'll just say this to you. I don't wish anybody should suffer, God forbid. I'm not into suffering. It's not my field. But if you do suffer for your faith, or someone does spit at you, and someone says, I'll buy you the reward because you remain loyal to Hashem, so don't sell it. It's not worth it. It's great to suffer on behalf of God. I don't wish it on you, but the reward is very, very great. And all our forefathers did it. Hashem should watch over you, and you should continue, and don't even think of Abraham. You know how many tests he was given, what he had to do, what he endured, and he had to deal with Pharaoh in chapter 13, and Avimelech, and Jacob had such problems, and he had to go down to Egypt, and he thought his son was sick. This is the nature of a Jew, that we're constantly enduring challenges in our lives, and you, my dear brother, are no exception. Join the club. Awesome. The Jews are not the biggest hit in the United Nations. Anyways,
Sean, thanks for calling in, brother.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
That's awesome.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Oh,
okay. Good deal.
Be strong and of good courage. Those are not my words. The words of the prophets.
Hey, real quickly, wasn't there one of the great sages that had to go through all the suffering? He was trying to study at yeshiva and he couldn't afford it, and he found a place on top of the roof in the wintertime and fell asleep and frozen.
And he couldn't do it. Yeah.
And he became a great sage.
Yeah,
so.
Everybody goes through these challenges, and that's all. And that's it. It does shock me because I never encountered racism in the Orthodox world, and in my world, not only that, it was in my home. Every Shabbos there were people there who were Jewish, not Jewish, religious, not religious. This is just a non-issue.
Right.
But I have no doubt that we have crazy people, so we do. So just move on.
Awesome. All right, let's move on to this caller. Caller, welcome to the show. Please tell us your name, where you're calling from.
My name is Grant. I'm in Hesperia, California.
Grant, welcome to the show. What's the question for Rabbi Singer today?
I had a question. So I had a tragedy. I had a son, and his mother murdered him, and I used cannabis because I have post-traumatic stress. And I was just wondering, like, because I'm trying to convert to Judaism. There's a Reform synagogue that I go to over in Victorville, but I want to go to L.A. How is the Orthodox community, how are they going to feel about me using cannabis in my situation? It's just something that has been in my heart. I watch the show a lot. I have a lot of books. I bought the Tefillin. I have mezuzahs. I've spent a lot of money. I have a lot of books and stuff. I really want to convert to Judaism. I was just trying to see if the rabbi could point me in the right direction.
Man, first of all, I'm very sorry for your loss and for your troubles. That's definitely.
Oh, thank you, my brother.
Yeah. All right. Rabbi?
I am so sorry that you endured something so unimaginable. I really am very, very sorry. The use of cannabis, I'm not a scientist in this matter, but it's very clear that the science on cannabis is pointing in the direction that it is so helpful to people who, for medicinal reasons, that helps them. In fact, people have special neuroreceptors for cannabis, and if you are using it to deal with depression or whatever it is, or for any, there's the people who suffer from all kinds of things, suffer from nausea. Cannabis can help in ways that other medications fail. People who have epileptic seizures and so on, and it's medicinally, I think, probably in every state in America it's legal. Maybe the state that isn't, I'm not sure. But there is not only isn't there a bias against it, but in Israel, Israel is way ahead of the United States on cannabis and using it for medicinal reasons. And in fact, Israel has developed techniques to produce cannabis of different levels of THC and the other chemicals in cannabis that are naturally present to produce all sorts of strains that are most suitable for different types of ailments. And it's exporting it, and it's actually some of it is overseen by rabbinical supervision because people are using cannabis and the oils and the extracts in foods. So I can assure you one thing, and that is you're not going to have a problem in conversion and so on because you're using cannabis to deal with anxiety and depression. That will never be an issue. As it turns out, I mean, people take, in the United States, people suffer today really cannabis is not really very addictive at all. I think it has a 9% addictive rate, which is rather insignificant. People use opiates and so on that are highly addictive and very dangerous. So my experience, even though this is not my field and expertise, but my experience in the land of Israel, where a person can, and there's no such thing as a that I ever heard of as an issue of using cannabis for medication. In fact, not only that, there is responsa going back to the 19th century and the 18th century on the use of cannabis by rabbis on Jewish festivals. So my experience is that this is not going to be an issue. It's a medication that's really benign compared to other medications people take for anxiety that are highly addictive. And people take all sorts of Oxycontin, which is highly addictive and very dangerous. But cannabis is not, and no one ever died of using cannabis unless they smoke or whatever, however they take it, and then get behind the wheel of a car. That's the only thing to be careful of. That's very dangerous. So no, you're not going to encounter any problem. with cannabis, unless some Jewish guy is completely ignorant. There could be, but I've seen studies done by doctors and neuroscientists on it, and the science that is coming out. Because when I studied social work, and you had to study addiction and so on, today, all the trajectory on cannabis is pointing in the direction that it's a medication that's able to help people that other medications are not, and that it's not as highly addictive, and it's not really the chain drug that it used to be, and everything is turning in the direction. You're not going to have a problem with it. It's not an issue. Hashem should only comfort you from all your suffering. Gosh, I have no words. I'm just so sorry. Hashem should comfort you and strengthen you. It should go from strength to strength. Feed the poor and ask Hashem for guidance in your life, and it should give you you'll never recover from this terrible tragedy, but you certainly will, please God, be able to cope with it. But I can't really speak to it because it's something unimaginable. I'm just very sorry you went through that, but cannabis is just not a problem you're ever going to be dealing with in the Jewish community. It's just a non-issue.
Gotcha. Okay, and I want to separate, even as the same exact question for a different purpose. I know people are wondering now. Okay, so now on a different topic altogether, and this is extremely short because we got a caller on hold. People are saying, hey, now speaking on cannabis in general, it's actually not illegal anymore in certain states. Can we smoke it recreationally, just like you would drink a beer? Is that something that would be acceptable? Just quick yes or no, or?
Well, I mean, technically, Dina de Malchusa Dina, the law of the land is the law, and there's no prohibition if it's not illegal. However, the problem is that if somebody takes cannabis, and they've been working on this thing like it's the atom bomb, which means that today the levels that's way over that it does make dulls a person's senses, and it has it's not a good idea for somebody to do it recreationally. It's not, because recreationally a person is going to be high all the time. That's not a good thing. It's not like you have a beer and you feel just a little relaxed, because cannabis stays in your head body takes a very long time to process it, so it's not a good idea for somebody to do it. But it's not against Jewish law to do that. I will not tell you that. If it's not illegal, like where I'm in Indonesia, it's not only illegal. You can literally get the death penalty in this part of the world. They don't kid around with drugs here. But in the United States, there's no Jewish law on it. But person should not be stoned all the time. That's a very bad idea. And we see in Tanakh that although people can drink wine, and wine is praise, kiss me with the kisses I lips, for thy love is better than wine. To have a drink is fine. But the prophets do warn us not to get drunk. There are passages like that Solomon warned us about the dangers of being drunk. And the same thing would be with cannabis. Now, the alcohol is far more dangerous than cannabis is. I don't have to even tell you. A person could die from alcohol, can't die from cannabis. But no, technically, it's not against law. But it's not. There are things, I just want to say this. There is a concept in Judaism of things that are forbidden, and there are other things that are technically, they're not forbidden, but a person shouldn't do it. And this would be one thing. A person shouldn't just be high for days. That's really not a good idea. But I cannot tell you it's a violation of one of the 613 commandments. I'm not going to make that up. Okay. So it's pater l'avolasur. Probably should stay away from that.
Got it. Okay, cool. Let's take this next caller. Caller, welcome to the show. Please tell us your name, where you're calling from.
It's Greg, and I had dropped a call. I had just called, but I had another question.
Okay.
So, my son was murdered by his mother, and it's kind of affected my life more than one. I really want to.
Hey, Greg, your phone just kind of dropped off. You're still connected, but it sounds really quiet now. I'm having a hard time hearing you.
Okay.
That's better.
Basically, what my question is, I want to do tshuva, and I'm in the LA above it. I'm in Victorville, but I only have a Reform synagogue, and I'm come being more religious. I'm trying to eat kosher. I'm trying to do as much as I can to be Jewish, but it's just hard for my area. So, my question is always like I mean, obviously I want to convert and move down there, but what like pathways or what kind of, how do you do that? Because it's like hard, because like my mom's disabled and I take care of her, you know, so like I'm like this crossroad kind of.
Just one question for you, because I want to be clear. I only eat meat on the Sabbath, because there's no kosher meat in Indonesia, and I have to bring it in from Singapore or Israel or Manila or wherever. So what difficulty is there in being observant? That means, what do you find the most challenging thing about observance? Like, what is
I would say that because I live with someone that's not observant. And I have roommates, other people that aren't observant, so it's kind of hard. Or like other people around me don't really understand what I'm doing, and they kind of get judgmental, or they say that I'm being like full of myself and stuff, when I'm really not. I'm just trying to let my light shine, and I'm trying to love God, you know, and like other people around me don't understand. But when I go to the synagogue, you know, or like I go to shul, or when I'm fellowshipping, you know, I have shalom, I feel peace, I have, you know, like, but I'm just trying to deal with like this, you know, on Purim, like the day after Purim, I had to testify for my son being killed by his mother. So, and that was this year. So I've had a lot of tragedy that I had to deal with. Like it's been like a 3-year process, and this is the first time I've ever got to like talk to a rabbi besides the student rabbi. So I'm just really emotional right now, and I just thank you so much for you guys having this show. And you guys,
let me say this, my dear brother, before you hang up, okay? This is a very serious tragedy you've gone through. Unimaginable. I'm listening to you, and it's almost hard. It's difficult for me to process what you've gone through. And you're obviously in a really unenviable situation. And I would really like to help you. And I think your very difficult situation is really not best suited on air. It's perhaps you and I could speak over Skype or something like that, because I would like to help you through this unimaginable difficulty. But truthfully, of course, you're caring for your mother. It's very important. On air, I can only talk about general things, but you have very serious, unimaginable issues that I really would like to help you out. And I don't think I can adequately do it on air. Of course, I would say to you, but it's just so inadequate. You know, the book of Psalms, the very first verse is Ashrei ish asher lo holach ba'atzos v'shoyim. Happy is the man that does not go in the advice and the ways of the wicked ones, and the v'derech chatoim lo yomad, and doesn't stand among those who are sinful, Moshe Leitzim lo yoshav, and he does not stay in the company of those who are scoffers. It's the very first word of the whole passage of the book of Psalms. So I could tell you, generally speaking, that such an environment is spiritually suffocating and shouldn't be there. But from what you've told me, there are so many externalities that you've described that are way beyond the scope of a broadcast answer. And I would like the opportunity, if you would message me. You have my email address. Please send me a message, and we'll arrange for a time for you and I to speak. It's just so beyond the scope of this show, and I really need to help you out here. I've got to understand more about your situation. I can't let you drown in this. This is a very, very, very bad situation. I want to help you.
Toda, Rabbi. Thank you so much.
All right. So you're going to send me a message either on Facebook or email, and then we're going to arrange to talk on Skype.
Yes, your email is tobiasinger1@AOL, right?
Right. Yeah. It's way beyond the scope of the show, and I can't let you flounder. You've gone through the unimaginable. We need to sit and talk together, and I need to listen to you. Thank you, my brother. All right. So, but you need to be around positive people, not around scoffers. Right. But that's a general thing. You're obviously going through an unimaginable ordeal, and I'd really rather help you personally and understand your specific circumstances. Okay.
Thanks,
God
Rabbi.
bless you.
Sure.
Let's
God
be
bless
in
you.
touch.
Thank you so much.
Okay, take care.
All right, shalom.
Wow, can't even imagine. Wow. Yeah, that's just nerve-wracking. Okay. Wow, it's been a very, very, very full show. Close with a little bit of sadness there. I'm sure there's many people out there who probably have had, not many, hopefully, but several people who have had losses of children. I lost a nephew one time to gang violence stuff, and it was just it was a very, very tough thing to endure. So, well, I tell you what, Rabbi, I guess we can go and wrap it up. It's been a nice full 2 hours today, and it was really lovely seeing you again as usual. And again, everybody, please go to Rabbi's website, and if you don't have the audio books, you need to go there and listen to them with the actual books themselves, because if you don't, you truly are missing out on a lot of stuff. In fact, some of you have read his books and said, man, I wish he would talk a little bit about this. He may have. You just probably didn't hear it. Go to the website, go to the free audio, and click on the associated link that matches your chapter title. So you won't regret that, I promise you. So, Rabbi, we'll see you again. I've said it before, and I'm going to keep saying it. I'm going to try to maintain, at least to some degree. I know we've had a lot of American holidays and holy days and stuff that's been in and out, but I'm going to try to get on an every week show, at least with you, so we can do our show. Now, I may talk with you. I'm letting everybody else know too about maybe moving it up an hour to 10 a.m. instead of 11 a.m. So that way it'll work better on my scheduling in that way. So you and I'll talk more about it, Rabbi. For you, it's probably earlier is better. It's almost 1 a.m. there, your time?
It's 2 a.m.
2 a.m. So, gotcha. So you're 13 out. Okay. Yeah, so we may try to pull that off. And but either way, I'm going to try to get on an every week show, at least with one show that would be yours. That was the primary beginning of Tanakh Talk, and I think we'll try to maintain that as best as possible. So keep just kind of keep an eye on me for future. And as far as the Facebook, I'll put up notices there if we're going to record or if we can't record, that sort of thing. So, but this is the on week, so we'll get more shows for today and then one more for tomorrow. So, Rabbi, really, really appreciate your time and the wisdom you bring to the show, and I really appreciate it. Looking forward to seeing you again real soon, maybe next week, if not 2 weeks out. So, shalom to you, Rabbi. Appreciate you. Shalom, everybody.
חשוב מכל חשוב והכרחי להיות ביחד